Joe and Janes who, want to help our fellow citizen. That's my viewpoint.
Yeah,
And when you
absolutely.
go through the 10-point vision of a secular America, I put it to whether it's liberal religious, who I think many of whom would agree with us, or the religious right, and say, hey, you want to disagree? Go right ahead, because what we're talking about is basic honor, decency, compassion. It's really difficult stuff to argue with. And I think that's sort of a distinction. Whereas with our liberal religious friends, and I'm not saying we shouldn't debate them on it, I'm totally for that, but I think it should be a friendly debate, because I think what we really want to get, most importantly, is changing that government back to separation of church and state.
Well, that actually segues great into my first question. One of the things that I have noticed, and maybe this is just me, but one of the main differences between religious and the atheist is it seems like on our side, on the atheist side, we love to debate, and it seems like we want to, in my opinion, almost do this backwards. We want to prove that they're wrong, so the government will change because everybody understands that religion is wrong. Whereas the religious already believe they're right, and most of them don't have any desire to debate, so they're freed up to focus on politics and entrenching themselves and all of that. I mean, is that what you're seeing? I mean, I think that the main thing is the disproportionate representation that we see throughout our government. I mean, as I think you can attest to, it just speaks to that. And with your 10-point plan and what you're planning on doing in Iowa and all of that, I think that's wonderful. So please speak to that. And is there anything else that you can think of that can draw us, as atheists, more away from trying to the debate aspect, which we love, and get it more into something that, in my opinion, is going to make a bigger impact?
Right. Well, first of all, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with debating. There's people like Matt Dillahunty or whoever are really good at that, and I think
Okay.
there are many people who are very persuaded by that. So I'm not dismissing that. But what I'm saying is we've got a major missing puzzle piece, and that's what I'm discussing here with Secularity USA, is political engagement. And yes, I do think we have the cart before the horse, especially in terms of public policy. That is, if we're trying to get a Unitarian or a United Church of Christ, and I can tell you from my experience in politics that most of these people, as far as issue by issue, church-state separation, they're on our side. So I'm going to set aside the debate on the ultimate, religious question, because what I want them to do is team up with me on these 10 points in the 10-point vision of a secular America, and then engage with us. You mentioned about Iowa, and I want to emphasize this is a national, I can't emphasize this enough, a national project. So if you live in Florida, Hawaii, Maine, Alaska, any place in between, this is relevant to you. But we do have an opportunity in Iowa, all of us, no matter where you live, because it just so happens, because the nature of the American political process, that Iowa is where the national reporters and international reporters are trapped for months, like a year. These people are there extensively. And frankly, to use the element of surprise, a relatively small number of us can have a outsized impact. I mean, if you try to have political impact in Texas, New York, California, good luck. The campaigns are on TV and they're multi-gazillion-dollar campaigns. Iowa's the one place where you can go up to the Union Hall, and this is a true story, actually. A friend of mine did this, and hang out with Joe Biden for a while in a small group and have an actual conversation, and have your actual conversation where the audience includes CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. So you really get a chance to have a megaphone in a very distinctive way. So what we're talking about is working with people all over the country who, instead of, say, do their 2 years in the Peace Corps in Africa, which is a very nice thing to do, by the way, do 1 or 2 weeks in Iowa, not now, but in 2015, commit to do that, and help with our local Iowa friends and have this consistent message. We're wearing T-shirts. We are speaking from the same hymnal, if you will. So we've got non-religious people and religious people side by side saying, listen, we want separation of church and state. We want this 10-point vision of a secular America. We just want religion out of government. We represent the majority of Americans. And if we have that consistent message for months on end in Iowa, relatively small number of people, we can have a relatively huge impact on the political process. But it requires people being organized in every state.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's, what if nothing else, anyone who looks at your plan sees that, whereas in the past, I think the biggest problem is, like you said, we weren't very organized. This one is extremely organized. You're focused on exactly where you should be, and I really do think that you've got a good chance of having a very good, very well received impact in Iowa. And like you said, I mean, that being the focus of the presidential run is absolutely going to springboard it to hopefully everything else.
Right. And it's not really, I can't do this by myself at all. It's got to be a huge team effort to get this done. But having said that, in addition to the positive of changing the political process and putting the religious right on the defensive, I mean, it's my thesis that the emperor wears no clothes, that the religious right, with the perception of power, has had power. That really, they leveled off around 1990, just when we started growing significantly around 1990. But no one's really called them on it and said, hey, you guys are really sort of representing yourselves as more powerful than you really are. And so that's job one. But job number two that I think could be equally valuable, and this is where the whole team effort, the volunteering in the secular community is so important, is we need, as you described in your comment question, is that we need to really grow our movement into a organizational grassroots campaign effort that has an impact, outward impact, not face so much inward, but face outward to affect the rest of society. And this project has the potential to be a real positive culture change for us in that regard. That is to say, if we can really sort of turn a corner in the secular community and start having a grassroots operational approach, that will be very beneficial for this particular project in 2015, 2016, but it will also have long-term positive impact for us as a movement if we're going to really grow in major ways in coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to back up a second, if you don't mind, I got one more question. And you were speaking to the, kind of the power that, the religious side has. And one of the things that I've found most interesting in your writings is your law, your Faircloth's law. Can you kind of go into that and, specifically speak to the literally $1 billion annually that it's being spent on that side?
Right. The reason this is daunting, and you've picked the toughest nut to crack here, is the amount of dollars, and let's face it, that's backed up by the megachurch movement. As I write in my book, in 1970 there were fewer than 100 megachurches. Now there's a definition for a megachurch. We're usually talking about Protestant evangelical, and we're talking about 2,000 on an average Sunday. Now think about that. On an average Sunday, that is to say that one of our biggest national conventions, in fact, our biggest national conventions are smaller than what hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of megachurches have every weekend. So let's face it, that's tough as far as competition, because that provides a huge base for funding for things like Focus on the Family and Jerry Falwell's outfit. I know he's dead, but his empire lives on. And Robertson's empire. All of that is huge dollars that go directly, I mean, openly and directly, to public policy advocacy for the religious right. That's what brings me to this Secularity USA project, because I frankly think if we just say we're going to bull our way forward and try to raise as much money as them and go head to head in that respect, it's going to be generations until we win. We've got to have a strategic victory. We've got to get them in their weak point. And that's what I think Iowa represents as an opportunity, is really using our numbers in a strategic, pinpointed, focused way to change the political process. I mean, basically Iowa is just sitting there as a giant megaphone for us nationally, and that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I think that's what the really powerful part of this movement is. And again, I hope everyone out there, I mean, anyone especially that's in the central United States that can get there, volunteer, guys. I mean, to me, if I get the chance, I'm definitely going to be there, Sean. I'll do what I can. I've got two small kids, but if I get a weekend or two, I'll definitely drive over, because it's only about a 6-8 hour drive for me. So I'll try to come up.
To give you a sense of what we're talking about fun. I mean, we're talking about party bus. We're talking about organizing from various states and saying, hey, let's do this right. And I want to include, whether you're way off, if you're a listener in New York or California, we want you to. We want these big coastal states contributing, because one, it just will be fun. I mean, it's one thing, and I like it, to go to see a lecture and hear someone debate about whether or not to believe in God, or debating some of these issues. That's good. But I'd argue that even more fun is if you say, here, I'm going to ask a question on CNN. I'm going to help this minister who agrees with me, or this rabbi who agrees with me, and they live in Iowa, get them on CNN to speak for us and to say, I'm standing here. I mean, picture the scene. We got 10 of us there, and they're having some, I don't know, Governor Christie campaign event, and here's 10 of us wearing the same T-shirts, and one of us is a rabbi who gets up and says, here's my brother humanist, here's my brother atheist, here's my brother minister, and we all agree on this 10-point vision of a secular America. We want religion out of government, and we represent the majority of Americans. Now, that's a news story. That's something reporters are going to sit back and take notice of, and we are the majority when you combine those groups together.
Not to mention, you can always say to your kids, you're part of history. I mean, just to be able to be part of this movement that I feel will definitely have an impact and better the United States, whereas people have heard me on this program profess that I'm leaving the U.S. because of a lot of these problems. And, that's still potentially on the table for me. In fact, I'd say it's probably more probable than possible at this point, but hopefully stuff like this will keep me around.
Right. Well, whether you leave or whether you stay, a key point is, let's do what we can now.
Exactly.
Let's do what we can to change things now. And, there's lots of great countries all around the world. The thing about America, I'll hear people say, well, do be patriotic or don't be patriotic, or patriotism's wrong. Here's what I think about patriotism. Depends on what you mean. If you mean like some ethnic group or my country right or wrong, well, I think that's nuts. But on the other hand, something America did have, along with many terrible things and many terrible problems and bad decisions, and we can go on for hours and hours about all the bad things America has done. But the Bill of Rights, particularly the First Amendment, particularly within that separation of church and state, that was a new idea for a government, and a good idea. And that concept, rather than say, oh, we didn't live up to it, I'd like to see us say, darn it, let's try to live up to it. Let's try to live up to what are the true ideals, because whatever other faults, Jefferson owned slaves, and there are lots of bad things. But that idea was a good idea, and it was kind of a vision for the future, and it's up to us to kind of live up to that vision.
Exactly. And if it does get to that point where it comes back, I'm not going anywhere. But I've dominated this. Matthew, I think, had something, if you don't mind, going back to him real quick.
Good, Matthew.
Yes, on behalf of Coctopus Prime, who's I think having some sort of difficulty, technical difficulty at the moment, I'd just like to again thank you for coming. And you've referenced a couple of times the 10-point vision of a secular America. I have a sort of a condensed list of that I'd like to read, and any thoughts that you have about it or points you'd like to make afterward.
That's great.
Feel free to do so.
That's awesome.
First point, respect our troops. Our military shall serve and include all Americans, religious or non-religious, with no hint of bias and with no hint of fundamentalist extremism, coloring our military decisions at home or abroad. 2, reproductive information based on science. Any federal or state-funded program, whether offering services, domestic or foreign, that relates to reproductive decisions shall be based on science and public health, not on religious bias or the denigration of women or secular minorities.